everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining us today for the webinar on how you can help lead a positive, high expectations school. This webinar is designed for leaders in schools where you want to take the school climate to the next level. And can I say, when I speak about a leader, I'm not meaning a positional leader. I'm meaning that every adult in a school has a leadership role to play, and everyone has a role to establish that climate that provides our children with that safe environment in which they need to learn. For the next 45 minutes, we'll take you through what we see are our proven approaches, including setting those consistent practices that motivate teams and that monitor the success of the program. So you're always getting that feedback on how you're going. My name's Julie Grantham. I'm the Director of Schools for Good to Great Schools Australia. I'm also a former teacher, principal, and Director General of Education in Queensland. Good to Great Schools Australia is a First Nations not-for-profit organisation founded in Cape York Peninsula, and it's our mission to support the education of our future generations, but of all, not only our future generations, but of all Australian students. And it's our team of talented educators who work hard to serve all students and all their schools. We send our greetings to First Nations all over Oceania and acknowledge people from different cultures. Before we start today, can I just do a little housekeeping? At the end, we'll have 10 minutes for question and answers. There's a Q&A function there at the bottom of the screen. You can use that function to ask a question at any time throughout the webinar. If we can't get to answer it in the webinar, then we'll certainly do a response within 48 hours. If you would like to see our presenters throughout the webinar, can you go to the top of the screen, click on View Select, and then select Gallery View. We want your feedback on this webinar because we always want to do a better job for our next webinar. We do that because we want to continue to meet your needs. So at the end of the webinar, there'll be a 5-minute survey, and we really would love for you to take the time to complete that. Before we get in to the webinar, I'd just like to say our membership is free, and at the end of the webinar, you'll be able to use a QR code to access the website directly. I've already introduced myself, but I've got two co-presenters today, Stephanie and Mark, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. So Stephanie first, over to you.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name's Stephanie. I'm a teaching coach and curriculum developer at Good to Great Schools. I have about 10 years of experience in education, and much of that time has been dedicated towards direct instruction and literacy intervention. And in my current role, I coach schools to use evidence-based curriculum, resources and professional learning platforms, and I also coach positive high expectations.
Thanks, Steph. And I'd like to welcome Mark. I had the great pleasure of being a principal on the Gold Coast when Mark too was a principal. So I know firsthand of his standing in principalship, in leadership, not only in his school, but across the school community. So Mark, I don't want to steal your thunder, but do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Oh, thanks, Julie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar this afternoon. Look, I've got a background as a primary and secondary teacher, also a primary and secondary principal. So clearly I've been around for a little while. I think that must be the grey beard. I've had a little bit to do with the accreditation of international schools across Malaysia and in Australia. And I've also introduced direct instruction to a very prominent secondary school in Queensland, and it had some highly successful outcomes. So that's some of the experience I bring to the meeting today.
Thanks, Mark. And Mark didn't mention there, but as part of giving back to the education community, Mark has been helping out in Cape York at one of the academy schools up there. And we really appreciate having that experience and that knowledge come into the school and to that community and to help support those teachers and those children get the very best education that we can give them. So before we start today, I'd like to just do a quick poll. And there's only 2 questions on this poll, so it's very easy to fill in. I think the first question is quite easy. Does your school currently have a school-wide system in place to build on that positive school and classroom climate for students? So many schools will have lots of different programs that you would use. There's lots of different approaches that are proven to be successful. If you have got one of those, what system do you use? Because part of what I think that if you're going to create one of these systems and spend time and invest in making sure that these systems are implemented, one of the things you want to know is it successful? And part of today will be looking at how we can make sure our data tells us exactly, what's happening in our school. If there's an issue, when's it happening? Who's it happening with, and who's involved? All those sorts of things that give us that direction and pointer into, where we can put further intervention or further programming to make sure that what happens is successful. So that poll and that result, so not one person out of 10, that's a surprise for me, because one of the things that I think we've really been focusing on in schools over the last 10 years, that even as my time in the department and in principalship, one of these challenges that we've always faced is about that positive high expectation behaviour management, and part of the media rhetoric as well focuses on the negativity of behaviour of children in school. So I'm quite surprised by that, that only one school or one attendee has that school-wide system in place. So let's look then about this webinar. So this is about positive high expectations. How do you create that school culture where every student feels that safe, supported, capable of learning, their confidence to achieve to their best level? We'll cover throughout the webinar practical strategies to help you create that safe and supportive climate in the classroom. How do you reduce disruptions, minimise that during lesson time? Ways to implement it are those consistent routines, rules and practices across your classrooms, and strengthening the behaviour management systems. If you're going to implement systems, as I said, one of the things you want to know is how successful you are. Finally, we'll look at some professional learning. How can we support you in making sure that you've got those practices in place in your school that will be successful? So our positive high expectations is one stream of a whole program that we call Every Child is Special. The three streams, social emotional learning, positive high expectations, as I said, and character development, all make up this program that you can implement holistically or in a particular version. And today we're focusing on positive high expectations. So in schools, for example, in Mark's school, they implement the full program of Every Child is Special. And we have developed lessons for each week for 20 minutes on each of those streams to deliver in the classroom. And we've done it because we help schools to set those clear, consistent behaviour expectations that you want to see right across your school, that students then know a routine and what's expected of them and how they need to behave in order to reach that expectation. To me, it's one way of creating that approach to well-being and values that the whole school can encompass, that leaders, that teachers, students are all aligned in the work that this happens. We'll go through some ready-to-use resources for your staff where you can download them for free and implement them in your school. And all of this, of course, leads towards that building of that positive school climate. For me, I think one of the big benefits is that confidence that you'll see grow in your staff as they know that they're implementing those expectations, those high expectations that you want to see and across the school, that they're doing their part in contributing to that achievement of that goal. So, Steph, let's take us through what are positive high expectations.
Yeah, so positive high expectations is the ACT component of the Every Child is Special program. So it's one stream and it focuses on the ACT part of Feel, Act, Become. So it's more than just creating academics. It's about teaching students to act in ways that reflect shared values across the school. And the foundation that helps every child feel supported, to act with purpose and to become their best self. So when we set these clear expectations for students and model these values, like Julie mentioned, we help students grow both academically and personally as well, which is what that focus is about.
And Mark, when you were a principal on the Gold Coast and in your stint as principalship as head of campus now, what do you know best about positive high expectation schools?
Look, I think it's a wonderful program, as it mentions there, in cultivating that positive mindset. And what we see in kids is a sense of I can do and a sense of success. It's important in the dot point there, high expectations for every student. So regardless of where they're at and what they're doing, we can still bring kids together. So it's a very, very inclusive program. With an equal emphasis, the academic learning is important, but the personal growth is where I've seen the most staggering results with kids, just massive growth in short periods of time. And again, it's about their own confidence. The other one that's really important for me, though, it mentions there that shared responsibility. What I see as a result of the program is that there's a language of high expectation across the school. All of the teachers are using similar terms. The kids start using the same terms. And then we have that the whole jargon or language is lost into very simple work that the school's on. It involves parents. We've got mums and dads coming into the school. All their messaging on Facebook, etc., is the same messaging. So there's that consistency of pattern across the community, and it really does bring people together, Julie.
And Mark, one of the things that I noticed when I was there was that positive affirmation that teachers constantly praise and build that positivity amongst the students and build the confidence of students that I know that this is the right thing to do. So I felt that was palpable when I was last in your school.
Yeah, and I think the focus on positive affirmations with kids brings the whole class up. It makes kids rise rather than identify the weaknesses. It's about the strengths and bringing the kids together that way. So the positiveness, if you like, also makes it a great place for kids to be every day, and that's really positive.
Yeah, I agree. Steph.
Yeah, so now looking at how Good to Great Schools Australia supports positive high expectations schools, and we provide a comprehensive support system to help schools embed a strong culture of positive high expectations. So we do this in a few different ways. So first of all, teaching resources. So we offer a full suite of tools like practice cards, behaviour management guides, and instructional materials. So teachers can use these straight away, and they just help make expectations clear and consistent, which is what we're looking at from a leadership perspective to ensure that it's consistent across the school. And then we also provide coaching. So my role is to actually work closely with the schools and teachers to offer ongoing support to do things like looking at data or reviewing behaviour plans for individual students and giving feedback on how the teachers and schools going in implementing positive high expectations, and just really providing schools with that support system if they have a question or an anomaly comes up, that we can address them and work through it with them. And we focus on growth. So it's everything we do is about supporting both academic and personal development. So high expectations aren't just about setting rules, which both Mark and Julie have highlighted. It's about believing that every student can grow and providing the structure and support for them to be able to do that.
Mark, one of the things that we know in any school at any point is that positive school leadership, but in particular about positive high expectations. One of the things that I'd like you to discuss is about the mottos, the values that a school has, and how that can be implemented with strength.
Yeah, look, Julie, sometimes I don't think schools take advantage enough of these great icons that sit inside the community. So the example here is how you can take, for example, those four values in the school. And I appreciate that, schools might want more specific values, and that can be customized to suit that school. But for example, the value of working hard, thinking how you can use that across the community. You can reward kids based on observations. You can create a whole lot of, visual references for classrooms, references on the Facebook page. So you can start to capture those as icons in the life of the school. And then, of course, as leaders in the school, you're constantly reinforcing that with kids, with staff, with parents. And suddenly there becomes a whole range of conversations, for example, about each of those. So the conversation about respect is ongoing. It's inside the school, outside the school, in the community. It's with mum and dad, it's with siblings, it's with, colleagues in the school. So it just encompasses the whole school as we work through. So I think the sense of it here is that you can use things like values really well to create a school-wide conversation that has a long-standing chance in the school of making a difference because you've got people on the same page. So I think a number of times this afternoon we're going to talk about the value of having a language across the school or a conversation across the school that can in fact have high impact. And these are a classic example. I've seen these work really well where everybody's on the same page again.
And Mark, I see there that there's a recommended watching there podcast that will actually reinforce that a lot of the things that we talk about today, if you have time for all our attendees today, if you have time, that recommended watching is a very worthwhile exercise. So, Mark, when you implement a positive high expectations culture and this stream of education, what are the key things that you found?
So I think at the end of the day, if you want the culture, you can't have that without the strategies. So the program provides a really clear guide as to how you can use a range of strategies to build that culture in the school. And a great culture in the school is not an accident. So these are quite specific steps. And in the actual programs I've seen and that we followed all of these steps so that we've got a complete picture across the school. And the notion of the high expectations culture, as I said, it's not an accident. So the thing that I noticed most is explicitly teaching routines and rules. And we'll talk about how the program can be implemented in a school a little bit later. But we revisit those in the schools I've been in quite regularly. We have special days. And we find that, people do forget things over time and it brings people back. And even the community and mums and dads, look, just a reminder, this is how we do things at school each day. This is our focus on high expectations. Here's what we expect of the kids. Monitoring school spaces is the same thing. What do we expect of kids as they're moving around the school, for example? What passes or cards do they have? What do we expect them to be? How do they move from place to place? That's another example. The rituals to reinforce culture is really good because those rituals can also become icons in your school culture so that, this is how we do things in our school. And in every school, it's going to be slightly different. So that's always a great piece of work for the school, especially at the start of the year, I find in those first sort of few days of setting the tone of how the school is going to be for the year. And again, you'll hear about our Every Child is Special program, and that certainly lends itself well to that. Then communicating school expectations. Of course, all of this can be modelled on our communication with mums and dads, probably a Facebook page, could be our school website. And the interactions with parents, getting parents to come into our assemblies and our parades and all of our opportunities to acknowledge with kids how well they're achieving against, for example, those school values. They're great opportunities to bring parents in and say, hey, this is about our school, not my school, it's our school together. And then the refresh practices, it is really important to go back and revisit those on a regular basis. And in schools I've been in, we've done that at the start of each term and have a special day focused on what are those important things we need to make sure we do. Then everybody's clear for the year. And most importantly, not only do the kids know what we're all doing, but all of our staff know. And of course, we get changes in staff. Our staff are also then on the same page from the very beginning of the term, and our term can flow through the year.
And while you're on a roll, Mark, I'm going to ask you about the role of the leader in embedding these high expectations. So can you just address that? And then I'll give you a rest.
That's all good. Look, modeling this is pretty easy because when you see it being so successful, okay, it's a great recipe and it's working. So for us, it's about how together as the leader, together with staff, how we show the kids how we behave in the school, what we model in our interactions between each other as staff, with us and the kids, that they see our values in practice, that we acknowledge that we might say, hey, look, did you notice that I was very respectful when I talked to that student class? So we use the language of the values and the language that we want to embed across the school. I think the other thing is the coaching and supporting is that we provide significant support to individual teachers. And part of that is also about a range of observations about practice, getting to talk about practice. And as a whole staff reviewing practices and data. And as a leader, we take responsibility for that, and great leaders lead. And I think that's the real focus in the school on this program is that we take that front step and we take that push as we go through. The data is really important though, because sometimes you don't know where you are at times with certain practices. And boy, if you put out a survey, you get some pretty good results back from staff. So getting a sense of where we are with kids and staff and what the data is telling us, and then using the data as evidence to influence practice, which also is a really vital factor, Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Steph, let's go through some of that data now and that use of data and the cycles of practice.
Yeah, so where Good to Great Schools come into play is, you might be a school leader that a lot of you have identified that positive high expectations is new to you in your school. So one of the key ways that we help schools embed and maintain positive high expectations is through our cycles of practice. And this cycle focuses on behaviour management and continuous improvement, which is not a one-off initiative, but it's an ongoing process, as Mark stated. So as a coach, I meet with the schools weekly to go through data together, and we discuss things like the most common behaviours being logged, when they're occurring, which students are involved in more than one incident, for example. And then from there, we work together to adjust routines or implement new supports or strategies to help these students. So, for example, in our CYAAA schools, we noticed the younger students needed more Tier 1 intervention and support. So we worked on explicitly teaching rules and routines because it was taking them a bit longer to settle in and settle into expectations. So we just adjusted our approach there, and we worked with the school to kind of address those things. We also saw that for the older kids, most behavior incidents were occurring between recess and lunch. So we made a few changes there. First, we changed a subject in the middle block, and that wasn't working. So then we realized there might have been some unresolved conflict from recess. So we created this thing called discussion circles where students could talk about and resolve conflicts from recess. And then we also worked on then shorting that middle break between recess and lunch, which resulted in a reduction in incidents occurring within that session. So like Mark said, you have to look at the data and make those data-informed decisions in order to make a change. And that's where Good to Great Schools can actually support school leaders who this might be entirely new to you. So, okay, I've got the data. What do I do with it?
And one of the important things I think we need to stress, Steph, is yes, we can coach schools, but we coach schools to build the school's own capacity so that
Right.
then you don't get to rely on an organisation like us, that we build your capacity to sustain that practice within your own school. So that's also part of the coaching, is to build the capacity of the school so that we know that the school can then stand alone without our support, if you like. In the introduction, I talked about question and answers. You may not have a question, but one of the things you may have, just on what we've said so far, you might have a comment that you want to make, and you can pop that into the question and answer area as well. So don't feel it has to be a question to get started, but a comment is always welcome. So Steph, let's keep going then on how we actually teach positive high expectations.
Yeah, so we do this in a number of ways. And firstly is through our lessons. We've actually created ready to go lessons for the teachers. And this is an example we're going to look at of what your teachers would be receiving. So for positive high expectations, there are 2 units, 9 lessons per unit. They're about 20 minutes each. And teachers receive a teaching guide with a full scripted lesson, so they know exactly what to say. That goes with the PowerPoints that we're going to go through. There are instruction posters that they're given, and professional learning modules, which we'll go through together later on. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of our lesson features because we're going to look at how we teach our school values and mottos as part of positive high expectations. So they're actually explicitly taught to students. So firstly, we explicitly teach these values through things like show respect, and then showing students how they can actually be respectful. Lessons teach the importance of respecting others and how this really fosters positive relationships. Having respect for the school, taking care of things, following rules, and then listening to teachers as well. And during our lessons, we also have something called Check for Understanding, which is just a really quick way to assess whether students have understood the material that they've been taught. So here, students simply show a thumbs up or down to indicate what they know. And this ensures that students are actively engaged throughout the lesson and also identifies any areas of confusion or misunderstanding that need to be addressed straight away so the teacher can visibly see their answers. Lessons also explicitly teach the school motto and values. And here, this is Hopevale and Cohen's motto, as Mark mentioned. So you can adjust this to your school's motto and values. And this helps students connect the values that they learn in class to everyday actions. So this reinforces that positive behaviour and character development throughout the school community. And then the other way that positive high expectations is taught is by reinforcing rules and routines in the school. And we reinforce this in a number of ways, but we're also going to look at now how these are explicitly taught in lessons as well. So flicking through some of our PowerPoint lessons, they explain what the school rules are and why they are important to students. We have another check for understanding, so you can see how well students have understood the concept, and this is consistent throughout all of our lessons. So we have different rules for things like play, things like wearing hats to protect students from the sun, rules about how we play with others and how we engage with others, and then using equipment properly and putting it and using it gently. And then also routines like putting equipment away once you're finished with it. Also moving to class quickly when the bell rings so students aren't loitering around and they know exactly what they need to do when the bell rings. It even talks about recognizing feelings and identifying your own feelings if a student is upset, for example. And then there are routines as well. So students know things like going to the Zen Den for some relaxation and time out. And just making sure students walk to the Zen Den to manage their feelings and calm down. And there's also even emotional regulation strategies like taking deep breaths, for example. So it's then it also talks about how students can come back to the lesson once they're ready, but you can just see how it's so explicitly taught to students, so that predictability is normally seen as something negative, but for students predictability is really important because they know what comes next. So then we're going to have a look at some of our posters and enhancement displays that Mark can go through, which provides explicit apologize when wrong, be grateful, brain breaks, all these really useful things for both teachers and students to visually see and use.
So, Mark, these are some of the posters that are in every classroom, I think, in your school. Can you talk about the purpose of having that display at the school in every classroom so that there's that consistency?
Yeah, look, I think the posters do two things. One is they're a great reference for teachers, and especially as a school introduces the program, there's that little period of time as we transition to this new way of how we do things in our school. But also when the kids come in, if there's a challenge around, something's happened and there is a need for a student to apologise, both the teacher and the student can make reference to that poster. So it becomes a very visual picture of language across the school. Being grateful is another great one. The chance, as you see on the steps there, sitting down, listening respectfully. So all of those key words that also align with the school's values or the school's special statements are also part of that reference. But most of the teachers, well, all of the teachers here in this school have a section of their classroom devoted to those displays. And so it's really easy, and it's often near the front of the classroom, so the teacher can sort of wave a hand out to one side and make a very quick reference. The one that's fascinating, though, is the brain break. I'm not sure how many teachers use that, but when you've got that really long, tight lesson, the kids are working really, really hard, and you see they just need to have a break for a second. Well, we call that a brain break here, and it can take different forms, but the kids know what it is. It's a chance just to switch off for a few minutes, then to come back onto the purpose of the lesson. The calm down post is also well used, where there's a visual reference of a picture of a young person just taking time to chill out, if you like, reference to a Zen Den, which is a little space where we can refer a kid to. And then certainly the end of day is about, at the end of the day, bringing the kids together and saying to all of the kids, all right, what's our sequence? What are the things we're going to do again today? So each one of those posters is a visual reference, and it's almost like a ready reckoner in some ways, where the teacher can almost point and shoot and say, righto, that's where we're at this point in time. And we found it very useful because it means that when the kids move around the school, as in many schools they do, it doesn't matter which classroom they go to, there's a consistency in messaging across the school. And that's a really powerful tool.
And there's also a recommended listening there as well. And if you haven't heard that podcast from learned helplessness to learned hopefulness, it's certainly worth taking time to listen to that as well. Mark, keep going on how the positive high expectations are taught.
Look, there's a series of ways that the program can be implemented. Certainly here, it's a combination of a lesson on a regular basis through the week, and that can be in different formats. It can be in 20-minute bursts, it could be in a 30 or 40-minute chunk through the week, maybe once or twice a week. So it just depends how the school chooses to implement it. But also there's the sense of revisiting the routines and rules. And for us, I've seen that work really well, where the school has a special day at the start of each term, as I've mentioned already. And that day just focuses on these routines to sort of do a reset, if you like, for the whole school. And because the whole school is on a reset day, it's a very powerful message. As for example, as us as school leaders are walking around the school, we're in and out of classrooms, and we can see the consistency of the message. So that's a really important thing. But the great thing about the program, as you can see from the notes, perhaps if you had a look already, there's a consistent set of notes for a consistent practice. And it's very easy for teachers to implement this dually. The kids, after the first couple of start days at a term, can almost tell you what's coming. So there's that familiarity with routine, and we're just bringing it back. And that's powerful. And the kids say, oh, yeah, we know how to do this. We go, good, show us how to do it. So yeah, it's a great chance.
Yeah. And Steph, we all can support schools with that professional learning practices as well as part of our mastery teaching pathway.
Yeah, definitely. So to help schools implement positive high expectations, we offer a range of training modules tailored to different roles within your school through our mastery teaching pathway. So whether you're a school leader, a classroom teacher, or a support staff member, there's a module designed to meet your own needs. And these modules are really practical, they're easy to follow, and they focus on classroom application. So they cover everything from how to lead a positive high expectations culture across your school, to embedding specific classroom routines, to also behaviour strategies that build student responsibility and engagement. So our professional learning modules are grouped by purpose to support different professional learning needs. We have course modules, which are focused on building effective knowledge and confidence across all subjects. Then we have our program modules, which offer deep training aligned to specific programs. We have our practice modules as well, which are short targeted lessons to address specific teaching challenges. And then we have our collegial modules. So these are designed for whole school teams to learn together, and they're perfect for student-free days with a focus on evidence-based practices. So now we're going to preview some things that you'll learn through our professional learning modules, and we're going to preview some now. Firstly, we have a learning lab, embed positive high expectations conversation into school culture, which is coming soon. So what you'll learn in this module is how to spot and shift low expectation talk in the staff room or classroom. So you're going to learn practical ways to reframe conversations with students, from changing it from why didn't you to how can we help you get there, to how to use quick everyday interactions to reinforce belief, effort, and growth, not just compliance. So you can see that these reflect that positive affirmations and really building students up for success.
And before you go on, Steph, Mark, you've been leading some of the learning labs on the student-free days for the last 2 terms. Can you just talk about how you facilitate that and the engagement of staff?
Yeah, look, I'll call it a package. The package of resources is excellent because there's always a pre-reading element for staff. So they had the chance to look at it the week before. We start a module and it's very interactive. So, we build on affirmation of good practice in the school. I'll use that term, Steph, because it is about good affirmations. So we know that there's already good practices in place. We identify those and work on how can we build on them. So the actual materials to support the lab are fabulous. The pre-reading is good. The activity for the person who's leading the lab is very clear. There's a good PowerPoint presentation. It's very easy to follow. But most importantly, the staff actually have a workbook and it's very practical. It's very staff orientated and it's very easy to work through. And at the end of the learning labs, we can do a review and staff get a sense of, yeah, that's what I've covered. That's what I know. And here's what I'm going to hopefully do differently in my class over the next couple of weeks. So I find that'd be a really good package, Julie.
Thank you. So, Steph, let's go into course modules.
Yeah, so looking at build positive high expectations school communities, you'll explore how to collaborate as a whole school team. So expectations are consistent from classroom to classroom, which is the main focus of that, having that strong leadership. So you'll also explore ways to use behavior and engagement data to drive your teaching decisions. So it's not just being reactive, but also planning ahead. And then how to align staff around a shared vision so everyone can contribute to a calm, focused school structure. And it's not just about individual classrooms, it's about creating a unified high expectations community across your school. So this module, Build Positive High Expectation School Communities, is about getting everyone on board. So leaders, teachers, parents, and the wider community. So some of the tips you'll learn is to use reflection and feedback to keep improving your teaching practice. And in the toolkit we're going to look at there, we provide you with a self-evaluation survey for teachers to actually assess how well they think they're implementing positive high expectations. Also, you'll learn how to develop and maintain consistent school-wide behaviour expectations. We also provide you with effective strategies. For example, the whole team might say a 3, 2, 1 countdown before so to get their students' attention. But just keeping that consistent across different classrooms is really effective. Then also building positive relationships with students and parents and colleagues. So engaging parents in the individual behaviour plans as well. Calling home to share positive news about a student is really important as well. And then addressing and redirecting negative behaviours constructively and effectively. So I talked about kind of reframing the way we say things. For example, don't be rude. You can change it to, can you speak kindly even when you're upset? So just reframing the way we speak to our students is really important as well. And you learn that in our course modules. So there's also a focus on leadership in building trust and fostering collaboration. So looking at our next course module, Deliver Positive High Expectations Leadership, leadership or strong leadership is a key in creating and maintaining this positive high expectations culture, and consistently checking in and reinforcing these explicit rules, routines, and values is important. So in this module, it highlights the importance of building trust so that staff feel supported and aligned, creating consistency across classrooms, which we've mentioned again and again, and then fostering collaboration so that everyone works together towards the same goals, which is super important. And then we also have practice modules. So these are short, quick to complete modules where you can teachers can choose specific skills that they want to improve on. So in this one in particular, practice to use positive motivation strategies, you'll learn how to use positive praise and affirmations to boost student engagement and confidence. So some of the tips you'll learn is we actually recommend to do a 4-to-1 ratio of positive specific praise to correction. So this keeps the classroom atmosphere really positive and encouraging. Using tangible rewards and visual data displays to motivate students and make progress visible across the classroom. And then observing students that are already successful in motivation to pick up effective techniques. And then collaborating with your colleagues to share ideas or tailor motivational strategies to your students.
So can I just say before you go on, Steph, one of the most important things I think with practice modules and where I've seen them work really well is if a school leader, doesn't matter what position, is observing another teacher. I'm observing Steph, and I notice that she's not using those positive motivation strategies often enough. I can direct her to go and watch a practice module. So that practice module will actually have an expert, a great teacher, who's been actually delivering this, and the snippet in that practice module will actually demonstrate to the person exactly what you mean when you say, or will you need to use positive motivation strategies in your classroom. So this module, these practice modules, they're not long, but they do focus on practices and techniques and building the skills of the practitioners in the classroom so that you can constantly make sure that you're improving practice. And that in turn improves implementation, of course.
Yeah, definitely. So we also provide positive responses posters for teachers and students as well. So these positive motivation strategies are also embedded in our curriculum and the teaching guides as well. So for example, like I mentioned, the 4 praise statements to 1 corrective statement ratio, that's actually reminded for teachers in the teaching guide. Recognizing students who are participating, those reminders are actually all provided for you by Good to Great Schools Australia. So if students are off task, generalize refocus by saying, I see a few students who are off task, let me repeat the instruction. All of these little tips and tricks are provided for teachers and school leaders, like Julie mentioned, to build you up to be able to independently and confidently implement positive high expectations across your school. So looking at the Positive High Expectations Toolkit, these are just some of the things you receive in our toolkit. There is so much more. The schools, these tools support the consistent behavior management across the entire school, ensuring that everything is needed for continual improvement. So there's things like an implementation guide, behavior management team meeting templates, for example, and these are the templates that Julie and I actually use when we're meeting with the schools. So looking at those questions, what are the most frequent types of behavior? When are they occurring? How often the behavior incidents occurring? All of these things are provided to you. So you can look at who are the students in need of tiered support, to really set you up so there are no question that there's going to be consistency across the school because all of the resources are provided there for you.
Thanks, Steph, and you've done very well. You've had a lot to present this afternoon, so good job. I see we've got 2 questions in our Q&A, or comment. So we'll come back to those at the end. But I'd just like to spend a little time discussing about how flexible these programs are. And we think that there are probably 5 different ways that you can deliver Every Child is Special in your school. So, for example, the first one is what we call a comprehensive program. And Mark, I'll get you to comment on this because this is where a school adopts the program in full, where they do Every Child is Special classes with the 3 streams, the social emotional learning, the character development, and the positive high expectations, teaching explicit lessons to students each week. They'll do things like hobby club, where they'll offer students opportunities to extend and expose them to new experiences. And they'll also do lunchtime chats where students can come and engage in conversations. that will help them develop some of their practices. So, Mark, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I think there's so many things in that on that list, Julie, that work so well that I've seen. I mean, I love the lunchtime chats. We've got a little group of kids, perhaps some conflict or some challenges in the school, or the young people who have some particular challenges themselves. To get that group of kids together on a regular basis and have a one-on-one chat with a particular, teacher or teaching assistant in the school has proven to be an absolute ace in the pack. And I've never seen that work before, but seeing it here, it's just wonderful. I've mentioned already the ECIS full day for a term to reset the school. They work well. The other thing that's important too is the social emotional learning units. They're so well spaced. The timing of the units, the sequence is really easy to follow. It's easy for the kids to follow, and it's actually very consistent for the teachers. So as a package, the teachers are well supported, and it's got some extraordinary scaffolding. So for our experienced teachers, for our beginning teachers, all of them have now been able to work well through, I'll call it a package again, but the program itself lends itself to that support, which I think is fabulous.
And remember, everyone, the full package, as Mark has called it, is available on the Good to Great Schools website to members. So we'll come back to that at the end as well. But everything you've seen is available to anyone who's a member of Good to Great Schools Australia. If we look at another way that we could implement this is where you could target a stream. So if you felt that your students needed particular help in positive high expectations, or there was an issue in social and emotional development, you might say, I'm going to pick up this package and I'm going to do this with my students because I've identified a need in my school to do more on this. So because these packages are self-contained, if it's social and emotional learning, you could pick that up and then you could implement that strategy alone and work through with all year levels. It covers it from foundation to year 6. You could work through that package with your students because you have identified a need that's relevant to your community. The third one is the classroom's lessons. Can I say across each of every child is special streams, we have something like 290 lessons that are designed to target special needs. So whether it's building their emotional vocabulary, building resilience, or practice perseverance, you can pick up any of those lessons and then deliver them in the classroom because they're already prepared. So it doesn't have to be a full package, part package. It can be individual lessons. The fourth way I can see it is that we have mapped all this curriculum to the Australian Curriculum version 9. And so elements of this can pop up in English, in maths, in science, and we see it as part of our physical education. But no matter where you place it in your curriculum, what you do is that you're reinforcing those positive behaviours, that emotional intelligence, and that ethical thinking across all the subject areas. And finally, number 5, you may want to tailor that support, where this is a highly targeted approach to support individual students that may need extra help with skills like self-regulation or that social connection. So it can be unpacked to really just focus on a particular group or a particular student. But what I think you can see is that it's very flexible. There's lots of ways you can approach it and look at that. Mark, did you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, look, and I also think it's very inclusive. So we have a whole range of kids in the school with different abilities, and those kids are well catered for in the program. The program can flex, and it can be matched and suited and adjusted. And I think that's really powerful. But the fact that you can identify it, and we talked before about a data school where you really are collecting data on behaviour, etc. There's an opportunity here where you identify a need in the school to look at the program. You'll find an element that will suit your need, and you can just implement that particular element. So when you have the whole program, as we do here, we can pick and choose what's relevant to us at any point in time. But it's also true that in the model that's being implemented here, we're really working right across the school. There's still that consistency right across the school around all of those elements. And again, you've got all the staff in the same conversation. And some teachers will say to other teachers, hey, look, this has been happening. I've seen this in the playground, or this is happening in my room. And then there's a wonderful collegial conversation. And again, there's a resource to support the conversation, Julie.
Yeah, I agree. Look, everyone, right across Australia, there's about 6,200 primary schools. And what we know is that we service about 50% of them that use our resources. And I think that's an example of that response that says these resources can be adapted and can suit our classroom or our school. Why did we do it? One of the things we always would like to think is that we're reducing the workload of teachers in their lesson planning and preparation. We like to think that the most important part of any delivery is the effective teaching. And I see teachers all the time spend hours and hours developing, looking for pictures, looking for resources, instead of spending and investing their time on the most important part of what their job is, and that is that effective teaching in the classroom. So that's why we develop the materials we do. We think that it demonstrates to you that engagement, that mastery of knowledge for students. And I think right across the school, when you do these sorts of practices, what you get is that cohesion of staff and cohesion about the expectations. Parents know what's expected. Students know what's expected. Teachers know what's expected. All our teaching assistants, everyone is in on this act. And I think when everyone comes together in this sort of work, that's when we get the best outcomes for the students that we're supporting. And of course, that work in professional learning that Steph talked about, it's already tailor-made. As a leader, you can pick up any aspect of our program and teachers can work through what does best practice look like. If I'm going to do this, what does it look like? I can observe it, I can see it, I can train in it, I can get certification in it, and I can, contributes to your re-registration in states. So engaging in the professional learning is not only building practices and skills, but it's also building your evidence portfolio for re-registration. So that's what I think is important for everyone to see how you can use all these materials in different ways to gain the best bang for your school in making sure this happens. So we've got two questions because one looks like it's a repeat. But Mark, I think and Steph, I think we should all chip into this one. How do we ensure consistency among staff when teaching and modelling high expectations? So Mark, I think, this is something you could kick off, but Steph and I think we'll all have different an idea that we can contribute here. And thank you, Fiona, for that question. So Mark, how do we ensure consistency among staff when you're teaching and modelling those high expectations?
I think a presence from leaders in classrooms is a vital element in any school. And I know in the work that we've done here, our presence in the classroom is to support teachers. So our time in the classroom is not for a gotcha that's a bad gotcha, it's a good gotcha. So we're in the room working with teachers saying, hey, look, what are we seeing? This was fabulous. We're in the room supporting kids. While we're there, we're obviously making observations. And of course, as part of the program, there are observation files that we can get access to that will give us an indication of what are the things that are good for us to take note on so that we can go back and reflect. And then the chance to meet with the teacher afterwards and have a reflection about what you've seen in practice. So I think the leadership presence across the schools are really significant. It's not about us sitting in our office. It's about us out with teachers, walking the talk and the kids seeing us also with a vested interest in program in school. And I think that's played a vital part.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Steph, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, well, I think everything Mark's saying in terms of how we achieve consistency starts with the school leadership, which is why, we're hosting this webinar today to kind of build the school leaders up for success so that they are introducing things like school-wide coaching where they become the coach to their teachers, data-informed practice, just making sure that decisions are consistently addressing or based on the data, having explicit rules and routines taught in the same way, having that same conversation, speaking, the same language to students across the school. So there is that consistency, there's that predictability, and students know what comes next, essentially. So it's not different between classroom to classroom or year group to year group.
Yeah, great. And thanks, Sarah, for your comment. That sounds fantastic. Good to talk to you again. You'll be accessing those, no doubt, after our conversation. So what kind of support or coaching do we receive if we sign up for a membership school? So on our next slide, we talk about partner school membership, and that includes a free individual membership, but a partner school membership gives you a little bit extra. There's an additional access to curriculum programs. There's up to 10 hours of that coaching that Steph talked about. and it can be customised to your school needs. It might be in classroom observation, data analysis, or leadership mentoring. You get access to a tool, what we call the Student Progress Tracker, and that tracks student mastery in their learning. And it captures a whole lot of information that can give feedback to school improvement. There'll be automated advice on how you can improve your implementation. It can help you identify students needing additional support, or how teachers can adjust their teaching accordingly. And then, of course, everyone has access to our professional learning modules, from core behaviour management strategies to that instruction that we talked about before. And of course, those optional learning labs, I've seen work in really, really well in building that collegiality of staff, and staff learning from each other, I think, is a very important tool. So if you would like to be an individual member, you can scan that QR code there, and that will take you directly to the membership signer. If you'd like to have partner school membership, then please, there's an email address there, info@goodtogreatschools.org.au. Please just email us and we'll get you signed up straight away. If you're not the school principal or the school leader, then please recommend this to your school leader for sign up, because you will access, if you look at our website, you will access such a range of materials that it'll blow you away, the quality of what is there to support you. So everyone, that brings us to an end today for our webinar on positive high expectations and the leadership that's required to make sure your implementation is successful. Next week, we have another webinar on build confidence and expertise with our mastery teaching pathway. Now, Steph talked about that today, but next week we'll really concentrate on it, like our step-by-step professional learning program and the certification that will go with that. So please, if you'd like to sign up, scan that barcode or email us and we'll get right back to you. If you've got any other questions that you'd like to ask, please put them into the chat and we'll make sure that they're answered. But everyone, thank you for your attendance today. It's been great to have your company, and I hope the webinar gave some inspiration to you on implementing those positive high expectations in your school body. Thank you and good afternoon.